From Geppetto Studios in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, welcome to the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast, your home for inclusive, positive geek culture, where we talk about movies, comics, music, books, and whatever else we feel like. Please welcome your host,
Bruce Campbell,
Brad Mendenhall.
Hey kids, it is episode 263 of the Cosmic Geppetto Podcast. Samantha Langsdale makes her debut to talk about Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. It is a wildly successful movie that has been getting criticism for its treatment of Wanda, also known as the Scarlet Witch. Sam offers great insight into the film. Anywho, Amy has a question.
What's the scariest thing you've ever done? And why did you do it?
I'm the father of twins. Yeah, I'll do it. And the reason I did it is I like being a dad. It's a little bit facetious, although honestly, having twins was terrifying. We wanted one more kid, and we found out we were having twins, and going from one kid to three kids is a pretty huge change. It's like, okay, well, we definitely need a minivan now, and these massive strollers that can handle three kids, because our youngest was 2 years old when my twins were born. I'm not a thrill seeker by nature. I don't like loop-de-loop roller coasters, and I have no desire to go skydiving, and I don't have an affection for haunted houses and stuff like that. But scary things, but the things that I do that are scary are, I love public speaking, and I love performing. I will say, two things that come to mind. Relatively recently, I performed as a singer in front of people. My band, Mendenhall. If you're not following our Facebook page, Mendenhall the Band, please do. I'll put a link with this episode. And I sang in front of people. And it was a very warm, welcoming crowd, and they were awesome. And it was a 4-song set. It was just a 20-minute set. And I have an amazing group of musicians that I perform with, and they were awesome. But it was still a scary thing. And it made my heart race, and I didn't sleep well that night because I was just so excited, and it was so heart-racing. Another thing, I don't think... gosh, we've done so many episodes of this podcast, and I'm not 100% sure if the story's ever been told in full. Years ago, in 1999, that long ago, I was in a Baltimore community theater production from Spotlighters Theater, which is a wonderful little theater in the heart of Baltimore. I did a production of a show called Blue Room, and Blue Room was a pretty well-known, you might say notorious play, because it had been performed on Broadway with Nicole Kidman, and Nicole Kidman showed a rear end in the show, and it was a very adult-oriented play, and I took a role in it where I had to perform a significant portion of the play nude, and it was theater in the round. So I was completely naked in a theater where there were people on every side of the stage. So, that was terrifying. And I vividly remember before going on stage, before my scene, and the wonderful Elvis Presley song Don't was playing before I would go on stage. And I remember the opening night, my heart's beating like a jackhammer. And I'm about ready to go on stage, and I literally had the thought, I could be in my car on I-83 and out of here before anyone would realize it. I literally had this terrified thought. I was like, I should just run. I should run. And I didn't run. And I'm not humble. and I think I have a pretty good view of my performances and my strengths as an actor and podcaster and everything else. I think I'll say that was a really good performance. I was really good that night. I don't think I was actually great in the role. I think I did the best I could, but but like those nerves and everything really, I think, ramped it up to a really good performance. And afterwards, it's weird what can become mundane. But yeah. So performing in front of a sold out house. It was only like probably 150 seat theater. It was a small theater, but performing nude, completely nude, in Theater on the Round in Baltimore. That was a pretty scary moment. Making her Cosmic Geppetto debut, independent scholar Samantha Langsdale. Sam, how you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Really excited to have you on. Our mutual friend, Dr. Anna Papard, recommended you highly, and I'm very excited to talk with you. Any friend of Anna's is a friend of mine. It's a subject matter that I need sort of complicated. We are talking about a week and a half after the release of Doctor Strange, The Multitude of Madness. A lot of opinions about this film.
Yes, yeah. People seem to be having pretty strong reactions, not to just the film, but I think the focus seems to be on the depiction of Wanda Maximoff. So it's very interesting.
If you haven't seen it, stop listening and go and see it. A lot of people have seen this. This is a successful movie. Let's go back. What was your opinion of the first Doctor Strange film?
I really liked it, and I will say in spite of myself, because I'm not a great fan of the character Stephen Strange. I had a hard time understanding why people would be fond of someone who's basically a very privileged, narcissistic, arrogant to the point of dangerous male character. That's not in my enjoyment wheelhouse. But I think the film was incredibly well made, and they dealt exactly with that. And that's what ended up kind of winning me over, is that the creators were aware that this is how Stephen is and portrayed. And so the fact that they tackled that head on was compelling to me. So I really liked the film for the ways that it's as much about him having to confront the sort of ugliness of himself as it is about setting up Doctor Strange's sort of universe as it intersects with other Marvel heroes. And I will also say I love Christine Palmer. I think she's a great character, and I love to see Rachel McAdams brought into the MCU. So I thought the whole film was great, very visually compelling. I loved to see this sort of visual references to the 70s comics. So all of that was a winner for me.
Benedict Cumberbatch was such a great choice for the Stephen Strange character.
Yes.
And we almost didn't have him. I know they became very close to Joaquin Phoenix landing the role.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Entertainment Weekly was actually reporting it, like that he was in final contract negotiations. Like it was as much of a done deal as you can have without it being signed. Apparently the issue came down to when you sign that Marvel contract, it's not, well, you do a movie, and if it does well, you'll maybe do a second film. You're signing up for 6 to 9 movies.
Sure.
Joaquin Phoenix, a personality that does his own thing, wasn't particularly interested in being tied down that long. My understanding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't see him as a franchise actor to that extent.
Whenever they do a Marvel movie, they talk with a lot of people. But one of the people that I saw an article recently who was under some consideration was Daniel Radcliffe.
Oh.
Way too on the nose.
Yeah, that lacks any nuance whatsoever. I don't think that would have worked out.
And I like Daniel Radcliffe. I would love to see him be brought into Marvel. People that haven't seen Eternals, the Eternals post-credit we saw Pip the Troll. It would have been a great Pip the Troll because he's a little fella and he's sort of has an elf-esque way about him.
Yeah. And I have a lot of respect for him because he's really worked hard at sort of finding a variety of roles post Harry Potter, including a lot of stage and musical production. So I respect the fact that he has wanted to sort of prove his acting chops across the board and has put himself into some really strange and unique films. That's great. I don't think it would have been a good choice to occupy the role of Doctor Strange.
I give Daniel Radcliffe a lot of credit because how easy would it be for him to be typecast?
Sure.
And he's taken odd roles, and he's short, not conventionally handsome, not a bad-looking guy by any stretch, but he's not what you would consider Tom Cruise good looks.
Right.
And has been able to, by doing Broadway, by doing odd stuff like the TBS show, Miracle Workers, Swiss Army Man, just an insane concept. And he knows how to find the right roles, and he seems very interested in it. But wouldn't have worked. But Benedict Cumberbatch is so great. The arrogance, the intelligence, but underneath, he's able to convey that bit of humanity and weakness and pain.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the first movie. It did feel very first Marvel film.
Yes.
When I think of Captain America vs. Avenger, the first Thor,
Iron Man,
they check a lot of boxes. I've found that I'm much more interested in the second film. And often the second films at their best are Winter Soldier was my favorite Marvel film. It took 3 movies, but Thor Ragnarok, when they finally had it all dialed in and they figured it out.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of first movie stuff going on there. Chiwetel Ejiofor is one of my favorite actors, especially as a bad guy. Him in Serenity was awesome.
Yeah.
It was a little tough where I thought Doctor Strange and the actor's name who is escaping me, he's excellent. The bad guy was sort of the least compelling part. This just shows. They had a great bad guy in Chiwetel Ejiofor who was playing sort of the sidekick, and not until the very end of the movie. I was really looking forward to seeing a lot more of him, Mordo, as the bad guy, which we didn't really get.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was very compelling. I mean, especially because he was so passionate. And again, I think a great choice for that role because you could understand why that character's so unyielding. So I agree that to see him, I mean, I guess we're jumping ahead a little bit, but to see him sidelined in this second film was one of the aspects that I found a little bit lacking.
Mads Mikkelsen, by the way, was the bad guy. Yes. He played Caecilius, sort of a thankless bad guy role for a guy with charisma coming out his ears.
Yeah.
I viewed the first Doctor Strange as like a solid B and good setup. I was very interested. I was really looking forward to this. I'm a big Sam Raimi fan. Also, since the first Doctor Strange, you had the wonderful little 5-minute bit he did in Ragnarok and did some cool stuff in the Avengers films where it's like, okay, they sort of did some table setting with Doctor Strange, and now that you've had more movie for it to get into the humor and really dial up the arrogance and cockiness, and a great way to puncture him. Let's get into it. Overall, how did you like the second Doctor Strange film?
Again, I have to say I was surprised. I liked it more than I thought I was going to. I went in with pretty low expectations given the sort of initial reactions I was seeing. I really liked Sam Raimi's treatment because there are actual horror elements in this, which I think is not something that we've seen a whole lot of in the MCU. I thought that was great. I thought some of it was genuinely entertaining. It wasn't the film I expected. I really didn't understand how much of America Chavez we were going to see or how much of this film was concerned with her journey. I didn't feel like the sort of growth that we saw from Steven was very satisfying because there was so much going on. There's so much packed into this film. that it's hard to feel the depth of, what we get from Steven by the end of the film. But that said, I also really loved how involved Wong is. I really love that they have kept him around the MCU. He's popped up, obviously, in lots of films, including like 10 Rings. I mean, I think Shang-Chi, this is all awesome to see him utilized in that way rather than just kind of remaining on the margins as a sidekick. So, and in the comics, Wong and Stephen Strange have a very important relationship. So I'm just thrilled to bits to see that cultivated. And again, because I'm a Christine Palmer fan, I really liked seeing her come back. And what they did with that character, I thought was pretty compelling. Again, the opportunity to fridge her was there, and that they avoided that option was exciting. So I thought there were a lot of highs, but again, I think overall, I will just say it's not what I expected. It's too busy. And then, I have a lot of major problems with the way that Wanda was treated. I don't like her storyline at all.
You make an interesting point. They could have fridged Christina. And the fact is, there was 2 of her in this movie. They both survived. They killed 2 Doctor Stranges in this film. 3, if you include the flashback.
Yeah, it's an interesting reversal of events. I think that's another thing. I mean, the bar is so low, right? To just not kill a woman character, you'd think would be easy enough to do. But that I'm remarking on it, I think, is evidence that they so frequently do that in order to drive the plot for the main male character. I love that they didn't do that. I think what I also liked about Christine's appearance is that she didn't let Steven get away with something at her own expense, right? It wasn't just that she survived, but that she refused to kowtow and let him walk all over her. He had to understand that, this was unacceptable behavior. So again, while it's subtle, I think it was still important, and it was really exciting to see.
A nice thing about the Palmer character is I always have a problem with entertainment, movie, TV, book, whatever you have, where everyone's life is just in stasis. Wouldn't have been really into the idea of, at the end of the first film, she wasn't even in the final scenes. They didn't really imply that there was a relationship there. There's no reference to her in his cameos in the Avengers films. What are they going to do? Bring Ko into the second movie, and she's still this interesting, beautiful, successful, charming woman pining away. She hasn't moved on with her life. No, she's marrying another guy. And when they have the interactions at the wedding reception between her and Steven, they didn't do a thing as I wish it could have been you, or her making longing glances at him while she's dancing. No, she's in love and she's happy with someone else because she moved on, because Stephen Strange is not a good partner.
Yes, I mean, this is an excellent point. And in, in the other universe as well, right? She made choices after that Steven's death to move on, to process that in her own way, to pursue a career she hadn't expected. Even that character, who I think was more emotionally open to Steven, was still not pining for him, as you say, which is great.
So, elephant in the room, the bad guy, nobody knew this going in. I think a lot of us assumed that Mordo would be the bad guy. Instead, Mordo was just sort of like a bickering cousin to Steven.
Yeah.
The bad guy was Wanda.
Mm-hmm.
Picking pretty much up plot-wise right after WandaVision. In fairness, when we last saw her in WandaVision, they did sort of set up that there could be a bit of a dark side to her. She was reading the Darkhold, even though we sort of knew what it was, but not really. But I think a lot of people, and myself included, were really involved in WandaVision. For her to become a jump scare, murderous bad guy, didn't sit great with people.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm one of them. I agree. I mean, I really loved WandaVision. And from my reading of that series, by the conclusion of it, she is well aware of how much harm she's done, and she is made to kind of face the repercussions of her choices. Some of it is incredibly tragic. I mean, it's all tragic, but I felt that series did such a good job of helping Wanda to process trauma. And again, not to excuse her from the real harm that she caused, but to confront her with it in ways that I think you could even say were compassionate. And so I was very surprised to see, as you say, to see her come back as like just classic sort of boogeyman with seemingly no remorse whatsoever, which I thought was a sort of reversal of what we saw accomplished by the end of WandaVision. And I mean, I read later that it turns out Sam Raimi hadn't even watched the end of WandaVision, was not aware of how that series concluded. And I think that it shows in Doctor Strange. So that to me was all very, very disappointing. But I think one of the things that I keep seeing come up, and I think there's an important distinction to be made here. So the screenwriter also kind of weighed in, recognizing that people were disappointed with the treatment of Wanda. And one of the things that he said, I've seen echoed by other people, is when you like a character, it's disappointing to see them do bad things. And so his interpretation is that people are just reacting to the fact that Wanda is a villain. I feel like that's actually a little disingenuous. But I also think that's if nothing else, it's a bad interpretation of some of the problems that people are articulating with this representation of Wanda. I don't care that she's a villain per se. Women can be villains for sure. That's not the base of my problem.
Oh, how much better would the third Iron Man film have been if they went with the female villain that they were intending to?
Oh, for sure. For sure. For instance, I'm a huge fan of Cate Blanchett as Hela in Ragnarok. I thought she was fantastic, as she made a great villain. I don't have an issue with this, but I think the problem is why she was villainous. To me, I think it smacked of some really problematic and long-standing sexist tropes, right? She's a woman who has a lot of power, therefore she must be crazy. And then that gets attached to her as a mother. And she's a bad mother at that, right? So that she's obviously so insane, so power hungry that she's even willing to pursue the sort of good mother version of herself to what amounts to death. And I think all of that is just steeped in really problematic stereotypes and sexist traditions. And so I don't have this sort of attachment to the character to the point that I have an issue with her being villainous, but it's why they made her villainous that I think is an issue.
And part of it goes to WandaVision. And so she's a bad guy, but it's not a believable bad guy from where she left off. When we last saw her, she realized the error of her way. She fixed everything. And then basically the first scene she's in Strange 2, she did the exact same thing where she turned this area where she lived into a hellscape and then was covering it up in some idyllic mirage.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things they could have done. She could be a villain who doesn't flat out murder heroes. How many times have we seen that especially in comics, but in other features, like the bad guy who doesn't realize the damage they're doing and what they're putting at stake and the danger, and they're not trying to hurt anyone. They're not trying to kill anyone. I mean, she murdered all the magicians. She murdered the Illuminati.
She was willing to murder another child. She's after America, who is in this film a child. That again, I just like, there's no logic there. If her inspiration is to save her children, and yet she's willing to murder this other child, I really have no patience for that kind of storytelling.
Well, you look at it, and it was a flawed movie, but the Wonder Woman 1984.
Ooh, yeah.
Pedro Pascal as the bad guy. And he certainly was the bad guy. He was setting a lot of really dangerous, stupid things in motion because he was power hungry, but people were put in danger because of him. But he wasn't going, it's like, well, I'm going to kill Wonder Woman to get what I want. It's like, no, I'm going to put Cheetah in her way so she doesn't stop me. And it's a fine line, but it shows carelessness and ego and hubris, but not being bloodthirsty. And I think there could have been there's a couple of things they could have done. They could have done that where Wanda wasn't trying to kill anyone. She didn't need to turn Reed Richards into spaghetti.
Right.
And snap poor Patrick Stewart's neck.
Again.
She didn't need to do that. Well, but she still could have done things that was like, Wanda, don't you realize you're going, they could have had this, like, Wanda, you're blinded to what you're doing. So then she becomes more irredeemable. Or it could have been interesting where the evil Wanda, the one who went off the rails, is a different alternative version, and Steven going to the character from WandaVision for her help.
Yes, I think that's a great suggestion. And this is another one of the things that really annoyed me. I've done some research into Western fairy tales, and this is one of the things that I saw in this film is this sort of reliance on the trope of the bad, wicked mother who is the one who speaks the whole film through and is dressed in dark, bloodthirsty colors, and then the good, innocent mother who consequently is almost entirely silent, right? So the good Wanda that we see says, I think, maybe 5 words. She's basically just a prop. And that's the type of Wanda we're supposed to understand is the good one, the one who is a victim, who doesn't say much, who isn't capable of apparently saving herself or her sons. And then the bad one is the one that has all the power. So again, it just perpetuates this idea that we can't trust powerful women who speak their own minds. Those are always evil. In the tradition of Western fairy tales, and I think it plays out in this film. I love your suggestion. Why couldn't we have empowered that Wanda, whose children were at risk of being taken, to actually get involved in the fray? Why not? Why not have Wanda confront herself? And I think that would have been truer to the version that we saw at the end of WandaVision. That would have been a much more compelling story for my money. Like, I will come see your film.
On one hand, I get it. Sam Raimi was brought in to make a movie. This isn't Joss Whedon. When Joss Whedon was brought in to direct the first Avengers movie, the weight of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was really put on his shoulders. Whedon was doing rewrites to all the other movies and was sort of like choreographing the entire MCU. This felt like much more of a Raimi brought in as a gun for hire. It's like, hey, we're going to give you a lot of money to do something neat. And you can, one of the things I liked about the movie, and you sort of addressed this, it felt more like a Raimi film with a little bit of gore, a little bit of jump scares, a little bit of horror, the comedy that's very specific to him.
Bruce Campbell.
Oh yeah, Bruce Campbell. That was awesome. All those things brought in. So it felt, first off, I thought it was a gorgeous movie.
Yeah.
The cinematography, the way everything popped was all great looking in a way that Marvel films usually aren't. Marvel movies have a house style, and this felt much less of that than other Marvel films. I remember what was being said about the second of the new Star Wars films. I guess it was Last Jedi. They brought in the director, and he basically said it's like he didn't really care about what happened before or what was going to happen after. He just wanted to make the movie he wanted to make. And it sort of has that feeling where Raimi, they gave him the toys, and he's a comic book fan, but it seemed like he's not really worried about, how are they going to redeem Wanda afterwards? He's not really worried about, does this tie into all the different properties that came before? It's just, all right, well, he's going to make the movie he wants to make. They can do as much or as little with it afterwards.
Right.
And I don't begrudge that, but if that's what you're going to do and you're playing with alternate versions, have a different version of Wanda. Boy, whoever is going to pick up that thread, And I'm going to go out on a limb. We're going to see Wanda again.
Yeah.
I've read too many comic books for way too long. Unless you see the bullet go through her body.
Right? Unless you see the body. That's right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that she'll be back, and I agree as well. Like this, especially with this idea of the multiverse, there's just no reason that it couldn't have been capitalized on. And I think again, I mean, the trailer or the initial trailer, and then some of the promotional images for Miss Marvel have started to roll out, and there was some fuss about the fact that it seems as though they've changed her powers. The nature of her powers look, at least from the initial trailers, as if they're not going to look the way that they do in the comics, right? And Kevin Feige came out and said, we adapt these texts, right? We're not necessarily producing a traditional just translation. We're adapting them. If that's how he feels, and I think that that's evident in some of the other MCU films and series, that they do what they want to do, and with fine, right? Because comics are very fluid and sort of polyvalent media. Why do we have to stick to these very kind of traditional tropes? And that's another thing that I saw when people were sort of pushing back, right? I had someone on social media say, well, if you're complaining about this treatment of Wanda, you clearly don't know how she's treated in the comics. And it's like, well, that's exactly the point, though. We do know. And you have a multiverse, so like, why not branch out? Comics are not laws of physics. There's nothing inevitable about this.
Well, we all hated the way that Wanda was treated in the comics often.
Exactly.
Wanda has been a very poorly treated character, but she's visually interesting, great costume. The relationship between her and Vision is a rich source material.
Right.
But oh god, I read the John Byrne West Coast Avengers. God, they just completely crapped on that character.
Yeah, my friends and I had all kind of felt like it was very resonant with the way Jean Grey / the Dark Phoenix has been treated in comics, right? So there's a lot of similarities where you have this, again, female character who is not just super powered, but I mean, almost like godlike levels. And the idea that she must necessarily go insane. She must be hyper violent and therefore needs to be controlled and or eradicated, generally both. I think it was really interesting to see in Doctor Strange 2, the fact that they brought in Charles Xavier was this really kind of just salty moment for me. My friend Spencer said that they wanted to give Wanda the Dark Phoenix treatment so thoroughly that they even brought in Professor X to mess with her mind. And I think it's such a great point and really disturbing. I mean, the fact that this is the only way we can think to tell these stories is just kind of gobsmacking.
Have you watched the movie more than once?
No, unfortunately, I have only seen it once so far, although I fully intend to go back and see it again. I did enjoy it. I don't want to kind of obscure that. I had a good time, so I will see it again.
Before you know it, it'll be on Disney Plus, which I have because I have kids, and if I don't have Disney Plus, they'll kick me out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
I'll definitely watch it again, and it's sort of a thing where, for me, a lot of the problems with Wanda, like if you just name the character Linda, they're not as profound. So many of the issues, and don't get me wrong, there still are. Oh, we're doing this trope again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of heightened because we're doing this trope with a character that we've become invested in. I feel bad for Elizabeth Olsen. Elizabeth Olsen is legit probably one of the better movie actresses working today.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to give an Oscar-winning performance when you're doing franchise work. But she was given very little to do in Age of Ultron. She was given a little more to do in Civil War. it wasn't until like the end of Infinity War, and she had a nifty scene in Endgame. It's like, okay, there's a little more to her, to the point where I remember people being surprised when they announced WandaVision. It's like, okay, they're going to give this high profile Disney Plus TV show that they were obviously pouring a lot of money into for two of the least interesting characters in Marvel.
Right.
Then she became interesting, and she was able to show some of her acting chops and make the character more real. They didn't vamp her up. Social media's a cesspool. Somebody posted a picture of Wanda from the movies next to the Scarlet Witch in a very stereotypical superhero pose, a female superhero pose, where she's somehow showing her breast and her rear end in the same shot.
Yeah, gotta love the Brokeback.
And somebody says, like, Elizabeth Olsen's a beautiful woman. Why can't they show her like this? And
Come on. I think you're right. Like, when you think about her starting in Age of Ultron, she basically just stood around looking like she was having migraines. Even in this film, whether I like the narrative choices they made, she smashed it. I mean, she was so terrifying, which is great. I think it's a testament to what she's capable of. So again, I mean, for me personally, I would just like to see more of that range. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think it's just an absolute testament to her ability to see how much she's made of this character.
For me, it's a little tough. She's worked through so many movies, TV show, scratching and clawing to finally get this interesting character. And then, okay, now she's the bad guy because apparently women can't handle the power.
Right, right.
I'll watch it again because I really did enjoy the movie. I feel some pretty bad decisions made at a planning stage and things that could have been fixable.
Sure. It was supposed to be messy, wasn't it? I mean, wasn't this another one of those films where we had a couple different directors? Like, there were phases where things stalled out because of creative differences. Is that correct?
Yeah, the guy who directed the first movie was going to direct it. He certainly earned his shot to direct the second movie. He dropped out because of quote-unquote creative differences. I feel like Raimi didn't have a whole lot of time to work on the script and bring in his own people. And granted, the pandemic sort of changes things around, but these movies are on a tight schedule. We know when the release dates are for the next 10 Marvel movies, some of which we don't even know what they are.
Right, right.
You look at Disney's calendar and it'll say like May 5th, 2025, untitled Marvel film. So they need to have these movies sort of like, and this has happened before, specifically the first Ant-Man film. Edgar Wright dropped out and they replaced him with Peyton Reed. They had to film, do post-production, and release that movie in under a year, which for films these size, that's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know that Raimi has best instincts with female characters, so I would love to say it's like, oh, he didn't have enough time. It was one rewrite away from fixing Wanda. I love Evil Dead. Evil Dead did not treat its female characters very well.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of horror films. So,
I mean, you think about Evil Dead, and I did a minute-by-minute podcast about Evil Dead, and I realized the female character, you can't even remember her name, and basically her arc is she gets rejected by a guy who then decides, okay, I'll sleep with her. Then she gets kidnapped, raped, and then becomes a bad guy because of the rape. I don't know that Raimi necessarily, and look what the Mary Jane Watson character in the Spider-Man films, it's just a hostage the entire time.
Absolutely. Right. And obviously Gwen is fridged, right? So like, and again, a lot of this has its precedence in the comics themselves. So I don't want to lay this all at the feet of Raimi or any other film director or screenwriter. But I mean, I think again, my bottom line is it's 2022, and these are creators who have, as you said, a lot of resources at their disposal, and comics are not natural law. you can absolutely adapt away from the sort of trends that are longstanding in the texts themselves. So, oh well.
There were things that worked. I did find it interesting that when Wanda had the showdown with the Illuminati, Black Bolt, his head gets blown off immediately.
Yes.
Reed Richards gets mutilated and destroyed immediately. And then Captain Carter and that universe's Captain Marvel put up a fight at least.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Right. It is the women who are actually having the battle at the end of the day. Let me ask you, because I have not been able to make sense of that whole sequence in the film. What do you think the point of us seeing the Illuminati and those particular characters, what do you think the point of that was, given that they all just get toasted?
That's a really great question. They probably want to do the Illuminati. Illuminati are an interesting piece of Marvel. So have them in there, and one hand, they're the most powerful people. They show them basically in a flashback. They have Thanos on a spike. So if Wanda's able to take them out that easy, that means, wow, Wanda's very impressive. But I think there's probably a couple of things. With John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, that could be sort of a test thing. It's like, okay, they've been talking about Krasinski being Mr. Fantastic. Let's see how people actually react to him and how he looks in the suit.
Uh-huh.
So that could be almost like an audition for the character to enter the Marvel Universe. I know they're talking about, they're doing the Fantastic Four film. I know the Watts, the director of the Spider-Man movies, just dropped out of directing that.
Interesting.
So now people are talking about Krasinski, who's a very successful director. How cool it would be for Krasinski to star in and direct, which he's done successfully with the Quiet Place films.
Right.
I think that's almost an audition, and that got a big reaction. Although, again, for the smartest man on the planet, he seemed pretty dumb.
Yes. Willfully naive, at the very least.
For Professor X, I think it was a case of, that was fan service. You have him in the floating yellow wheelchair, and he has the best voice in TV, best voice in entertainment aside from James Earl Jones. So, and it was so cool in the ads, because we heard Patrick Stewart in the Super Bowl ad,
the trailer.
So that got a lot of buzz. So I think that was like fan service and was a cool way to build interest. I think Black Bolt was just a joke, because that's the same actor who played Black Bolt in that
the TV series.
So then it's just fun. It's like, all right, we all know it was bad. Let's blow his head off.
Which was, I think, one of the better gore moments of the movie. Like I absolutely screamed out loud.
The Captain Marvel having the actress from the first Captain Marvel movie, I think that's probably a thing of, they like that character, they like that actress. Another thing to show how tough Wanda is, because Captain Marvel has been pretty frequently addressed as the toughest hero in Marvel.
Yeah.
So you can show how tough Wanda is by having her fight and beat a Captain Marvel. And then you get an actress who's sort of hard to find other ways to have in these movies in it, because it's been addressed that she's, in WandaVision, it was addressed that she's passed away.
That's right, yeah.
So you're only going to be able to bring her back by flashbacks or neat alternate universe stuff like this. I'm probably overthinking it, but they probably wanted to have Illuminati, and they came up with, and they figured out different ways to have everyone in there, and they all have their own motivations. Because there was talk about them having Namor or Wolverine, and of course there was so much talk about Tom Cruise as Iron Man.
Oh gosh, I hope not. That is not for me.
Scott Corelli from Dueling Genre Productions, he and I talked about it, and he was very dismissive. We both were, but and Scott's so much well thought out, and he's much better dialed into entertainment the movie world than I am. But he said it's like, it was just this weird, stupid fan theory because 20 years ago they were talking to Tom Cruise about being Iron Man, but that's it. It was just a conversation 20 years ago. So I'm glad that didn't happen.
Me too.
Until such time as they scrap the Marvel Universe and start from scratch, and it'll happen one day.
Sure.
Tom Holland will be in his mid-50s and he's not going to fit in the spider suit anymore. It's like, well, we got to start over.
I mean, hey, Tobey Maguire made a pretty good showing. You got to give it to him. But yeah, I suspect that's the last time we'll see Tobey. You're right. Eventually that will come for Tom too.
Between DC, Marvel, and other stuff, there are 20 to 30 big deal comic book properties a year between movies, TV shows, be it The Boys, Invincible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Walking Dead series, DC movies, Marvel movies, TV.
Watchmen.
Eventually, that'll go away. Nothing lasts forever. My parents, when they were my age, well, maybe not when they were my age. When my parents growing up, there were 20, 30 Westerns a year.
Yeah, yeah.
Generation before that, there were 20, 30 musicals a year.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, the bottom will fall out, and you'll start, and then they'll have to start from scratch with a new Spider-Man, a new Iron Man, just like we're on our, fifth Batman now?
Oh, my word. That's true. Yeah.
That time will come, but until that time comes, I don't want to see anyone else's Iron Man.
No. And I think I have a lot of doubts that will happen. I mean, they're in the process of making an Ironheart show. Tony will have to show up if we're using the comics as any kind of like source material. He's there at least initially, right? And I don't see, as you suggested, within the kind of time frame that Disney has given us for their productions for the next 10 years, I don't see them putting anybody else in but Robert Downey Jr. I'm sure he's not going to occupy a main role ever again. But what would be the point if you just need a hologram version of Tony or a flashback version? Why go any other way?
He's iconic in the role, and Marvel has done very little recasting aside from Don Cheadle as Rhodey.
Right.
That's the only really major recasting I can think of. There's been little things. Cass, Ant-Man's daughter, has been recast a couple times, but that's an age thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that was just to timing.
So there have been little bits of that here or there, but they haven't said they're doing a fourth Captain America movie now with another handsome white guy named Chris as the lead. At that part, when we were talking before about Joaquin Phoenix, he apparently, from my understanding, didn't want to get tied up contractually. And that's what happens with a lot of these actors. I mean, and Chris Evans and a handful of other actors talked about how they are challenging movies to do because the physical fitness is required. You're giving up a decade of your career. Now, you're giving up a decade of your career making $100 million total, or
right. There are probably worse ways, but yeah. Well, I was also interested. I guess I just haven't caught up on the projections, but obviously at the end of Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, it says Doctor Strange will return. So are we expecting a third film?
Yeah. They like to do trilogies.
Yeah.
Cumberbatch has got himself in a nice place where we don't see Tom Holland. We see Tom Holland in Avengers movies and Spider-Man movies. Strange, you see him in Avengers movies, Thor movies, you see him in Spider-Man films, and he's everywhere.
And then dramas and period pieces, and yeah.
They do have Stephen Strange as sort of set up as a character that goes through all of these. He fits in very well, especially this current iteration of Marvel, this phase, which seems like the weird phase.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have Eternal, Shang-Chi with its mysticism, WandaVision. So Doctor Strange seems to be tying all those things up. So they're going to do a third one. And you don't have a stinger with Charlize Theron.
Yes.
Which, that's neat. I like Charlize Theron. It's cool to see her in the Marvel playpen. I actually always liked the character Clea.
Yeah.
I'm very happy because I know she was pretty irritated. She had a bad comic book movie experience before because of Wonder Woman.
I am not familiar with this.
They were talking to her about being in the first Wonder Woman film.
Oh.
And it's Charlize Theron. She's a bankable star. So, of course, she thinks, oh, they're talking to me about being Wonder Woman. They were talking to her about being Wonder Woman's mom.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that did not sit well with her.
Okay.
I think it would have been fine because you're dealing with Amazons that are sort of ageless, and a lot of it was in flashback with young Wonder Woman. But I guess she felt, and right, I mean, on one hand, rightly, she's a star. If you're going to have a Wonder Woman movie, you're going to have Charlize Theron, have her as Wonder Woman.
Right, absolutely.
So it's neat that she finally shows up in one of these movies. And it was, granted, it was like a minute and a half scene.
Right.
But I thought she had chemistry with Cumberbatch.
Yeah, absolutely. As she should, right? I mean, this is the sort of future for Steven. And I think they did a nice job implying that through the dialogue. He needs to learn how to open himself up. And then, here's this just smoking hot woman who in the comics turns out to be pretty important love interest. So I thought they were great.
And I never was the biggest Doctor Strange fan in the comics, but Christine Palmer, was she even in the comics?
Not as such. She's, as she exists in the MCU, actually pretty unique because she's a kind of amalgamation of various Night Nurse characters. And that's who Stephen Strange in the comics has relationships with, is the character who's actually dubbed the Night Nurse, who originally started out as a character called Linda Carter. So there's a convoluted history behind the Night Nurse character, but the manifestation of Christine Palmer in the MCU is unique to the films.
So they found a lesser known character, beefed it up, and
gave it to a famous person.
So Clea is Lois Lane to Doctor Strange's Superman.
Right.
And it's nice because they give him a partner, his equal, who seems more of an adventurer than him. Because right now, the Doctor Strange we have seen, this is sort of thrust upon him. He's not really a superhero. He's a guardian and he's a magician and he's sort of deals with magic the way a doctor would. So it could be fun to see that.
Yeah, I agree. I am for that. If that's the direction we're going, I'm a fan.
Now, do you agree that there'll be another Doctor Strange film?
I think you're right that we are definitely going to see him kind of all over the place in the meantime. I think you're totally spot on that they've set that character up to really kind of juice Benedict Cumberbatch's contract as much as they can. And I also don't see why a third movie isn't possible, especially again, like in the near future, while everyone's still of an age that doing these films is within the realm of possibility for them to do it. I would say within the next 10 years, there probably will be a third film.
Do you think Raimi will be back for it?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to tell, especially because so much of fan reactions get reported so unevenly, right? So like, obviously we've been talking about the kind of dust that's been kicked up over Wanda in this film. But as you pointed out at the beginning, this film has been wildly successful. So I think ultimately that's what Disney cares about, right? Is the numbers. I would be open to seeing Sam Raimi come back. I think Doctor Strange comics are very strange. They're trippy. And they're in a lot of ways, they are horror. And so I think that having a director with that sensibility is the right choice. Who knows if Sam Raimi wants to do that again, right? Like, I don't know what, I have not read him talk about his experiences and whether he has warm feelings about all of this, but I don't see why not.
I'm curious because there's a pretty cool project or podcast called Blank Check, where they talk about different directors or performers, and they talk about how when they have a certain amount of success, Hollywood gives you a blank check for your next project. And they've actually done a series on Sam Raimi talking about after he did, after his success with especially the second Evil Dead, then he got a chance to make Darkman. And this was his first movie since 2013.
Wow.
His last one was Oz the Great and Powerful, which made money, but I don't think it was particularly beloved.
No, I don't think it was very popular.
One of those movies where it made its money. The studio walks away with money in its back pocket, but you don't need to make a sequel because then you'll end up with, to go way back, I remember the first Charlie's Angels film with Cameron Diaz made a lot of money. Nobody liked it. They made a second one and nobody went out to see it.
Yeah.
But I think almost like this is the movie where Sam Raimi, they run him a nice check to make the movie. He got a big budget. He got to give Bruce Campbell work.
Right.
And now he basically has another blank check to do whatever he wants to do next. And he produces a lot. He's had a lot of success in that. I think one of the things they talked about is Sam Raimi is very, very rich, not because of the movies he's directed, but because of his production work, his work as a producer on Hercules, Xena Warrior Princess, Spartacus. That's where he made a lot of money.
Sure.
Now that he has this success under his belt, he proved himself able to work inside the studio system. And still, is he going to go back to sort of producing his own stuff? Or is he going to have a chance to do a Star Wars film or a DC movie? Like, he sort of has his pick. I wonder if this was mercenary for him.
I think that's a good point. And that wouldn't surprise me.
I'm not trying to say that dismissively. There's something to be said for, hey, get yourself something in the win column and then go do your passion project. Because I know he loves Batman. Darkman was apparently, he wanted to do a Batman film and they wouldn't let him, so he did Darkman instead.
Right.
Sam, what's the Marvel movie you want to see or you're looking forward to? And it could be something that's coming. I know the trailer for She-Hulk just came out.
Yeah.
Could be something like that, or something that, they're not even talking about making, but you want to see.
I will say my initial reactions to the She-Hulk trailer are, I'm sure it's going to be great. I'm a little disappointed in the way it looks in terms of the CGI version of She-Hulk, like when she's actually hulked out. Again, I mean, this is just kind of like from my personal taste, I would really like to see her being properly beefy, and she kind of looks like the Avatar character. She's just kind of very, very tall and like strong, but still looks very normatively beautiful, like actually quite lithe, but busty. And I know that there are those versions of her in the comics. But I guess for me personally, I wanted to see them take advantage of this situation to put a different type of female body on screen. And so far, it kind of doesn't look like that. So I will still watch it, and I have every hope that I'm going to love it. So I'm not going to like draw conclusions. It's just even the initial look was not what I was hoping for. I'm really excited to see Ironheart come to the screen. I do believe that's going to be a series on Disney Plus, and I think that's going to be pretty fantastic. I just finished watching Moon Knight, and I will say that blew me away. I think in the way that WandaVision really kind of broke us into a different side of the MCU and showed us a different type of superhero entertainment. I think Moon Knight has done that, and I would love to see more of Oscar Isaac. I think he did such an outstanding job. Other than that, one of my kind of favorite characters is Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew, and I would love to see her. I know that in the upcoming animated Spider-Verse film, she will make an appearance. She's being voiced by Issa Rae, and I think that's great. I would like to see a live-action version of Spider-Woman. That would be super thrilling.
Spider-Woman, such a great costume.
Yeah.
I know they tweaked it a few years back, make it look less costumey.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to what they did with Batgirl, turning the top into a jacket, and Spider-Woman, a great costume, but a frequently fetishized one.
Yes.
And they were trying to downplay that, but it still looked great. So yeah, I would like that. I think Jessica Drew's, is a character that doesn't often hasn't been treated great. Similar to Wanda.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of potential there to do something really cool. And there have been cool Spider-Woman stories. I think some of the Bendis New Avengers stuff with her was cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I like her because she's kind of rude. Like she's got a kind of body sense of humor. She's another one of these women who just are not going to play nice. She does what she has to do to get her job done, but she also still has a sort of loving side to her. Her friendships are quite genuine and long-standing when they survive. So yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. Give me more salty female characters.
What I like is when I was reading comics, because there was like a 10-year period where Jessica Drew was not Spider-Woman.
Right.
And she was actually a supporting player in the first Wolverine solo comic.
Mm.
And she was like a private detective, but she still had Spider-Woman powers. And I really like that because she was sort of the superhero that was tired of superhero stuff and was tired of the costume. And she was sort of a private detective in this crappy country, seedy country. It's like, okay, I like it. And I think that's where a lot of the rudeness and the bawdiness came from. And then she had a neat, I know Bendis wanted Jessica Jones to be Jessica Drew. But they had, Marvel had plans for Jessica Drew, so we had to create a new character for Alias.
Yeah, yeah.
But then did you ever read the first run of Alias?
I did. It's been quite a while, but I mean, yeah, I can see that there's a lot of, I think, crossover.
He actually got Jessica Drew to show up in towards the end of that run, and it was great. And they were sort of fun. They had a fun dynamic. So it's like, yeah, there could be something fun. I would be interested to see in Marvel, especially with the Disney Plus shows. Everything goes a different way. So WandaVision was very different than Falcon Winter Soldier, which was very different from Moon Knight, which is very, She-Hulk. And I think they need to run that through the CGI through the computers 2 more times.
Yeah.
It looked like outtakes from Shrek.
Yeah. Yeah.
You sort of see where they're going with, but it's not. It's sort of in the uncanny valley.
Yes. Yes.
I'm hoping that that's what it is. Okay, they just got to run it through the computers a few more times, and they wanted to put the first ad out. I mean, Tatiana Maslany is wonderful. The actress who plays Titania, who was from The Good Place, she's wonderful.
Yes, yes.
They have everything there. I think it's going to be funny. She-Hulk, attorney at law. It's like, okay, you're winning me over.
Right. Those are the right things to emphasize.
So I hope it works.
Me too.
Sam, this has been wonderful. I could talk with you all day. Will you come back?
I would love to. This is so much fun. And I mean, I always love geeking out about comics, but it's great to be able to talk about these things in detail because it's now given me new things to think about and to look for the next time I see the film. So I really appreciate it.
You're welcome back anytime. We'll definitely reach out to you. Plug your pluggables. Where can people find out more, get more of you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's just samlangsdale.com. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @S_Langsdale. And it's quite a ways in the future, but I am writing a book called From the Margins Into the Gutters, Searching for Feminist Superheroes. And that will eventually be out with the University of Texas Press. So as I make progress on that, I will definitely be sharing more details on my website and on social media.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Definitely, we're going to keep in touch. We recommend everyone check out your site. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That wraps episode 263. Big thanks to Samantha Langsdale. She is welcome back anytime. So darn cool. Also, big thanks to Amy Kennerup. She is also darn cool and one of my favorite people ever. Next time on the Cosmic Geppetto podcast, Sarah Black returns for our series, Albums That Shaped Us. Till then, in the words of Jarf Hart,
see you in the funny pages.
Subscribe to the Cosmic Geppetto podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever quality podcasts can be found. Rate and review us while there. Follow us on Twitter @CosmicGPod, and we will follow you back. Unless you're a jerk. We don't follow jerks. Like us on Facebook facebook.com/Cosmic Geppetto. We love hearing your ideas for upcoming episodes. Email us at cosmicgeppetto@comcast.net.
Social media is a cesspool.